My sister wants me to turn my home into a hotel for her new husband and follow his rules. But she's calling me selfish? Okay, so I, 28F, have a pretty established routine. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, and while I'm not a neat freak, I like my space to be organized and have a certain vibe to it. Think minimalist, calm, and quiet. My sister, 30F, recently got married to this guy, 31M, who I barely know. They live about 3 hours away, and since their wedding a month ago, she's been asking to stay with me for a few weeks. Normally, I'd be fine with it. I love my sister. But there's a catch. When I agreed, she dropped the bomb that she's bringing her husband with her. Apparently, he doesn't feel comfortable being alone for extended periods, so she wants me to adjust my lifestyle for them as a couple. This means rearranging my apartment for them, having quiet hours during the day because he works from home, and no longer playing music or hosting friends when they're around. Oh, and she suggested I stop using the guest room for my own hobbies, which is how I unwind after work. Basically, I'm supposed to cater to their needs and make space for their relationship. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that, especially since I don't even know her husband that well, and wasn't planning on making my home into a mini hotel or daycare for them. She got super upset, called me selfish, and said it's just for a couple of weeks, but I'm really not okay with it. I feel like I would be giving up a lot of my personal space and peace of mind just for her convenience. Now, she's threatening not to visit at all, and I'm feeling guilty, but also like she's overstepping. So, Ida for refusing to let them stay under these conditions? Update 1. All right, so I decided to have an honest chat with my sister because this whole thing was getting a bit much. I laid it out for her as simply as possible. No way was I going to rearrange my whole life just because she and her husband wanted to stay over. I told her straight up, look, I like my setup. It's my space. I pay rent here, and I've got my own way of living that keeps me sane. I explained that hosting them is one thing, but doing it under her rules was a whole different story. I said I'd be happy to have them over for a bit, but they'd have to respect my space as it is. No special treatment just because they're a couple. At first, she didn't respond, and I thought maybe she understood my point. But nope. After about an hour, she called back and basically tried guilt-tripping me, saying stuff like, family should be willing to compromise, and it's just for a few weeks. I told her that if they came and needed a few small adjustments, fine. But changing my whole routine, banning music, and losing my hobby space was just unreasonable. But she hit me with, well, he has anxiety, and being away from me makes him feel worse. Can't you understand that? And I'm sitting there like, yeah, I get it, but that's not really my responsibility. I barely know this guy. They've only been married a month, and she's expecting me to rearrange my life because he doesn't feel comfortable being alone. When I mentioned that maybe he could try finding ways to manage his anxiety without disrupting my whole space, she flipped, saying I was being judgmental of his mental health. But really, it's not about that. It's about boundaries. I kept calm and tried to explain that I'm happy to host, but there's a difference between hosting family and sacrificing my own comfort. So, my sister starts talking about how, as a family, we should always be willing to sacrifice a little for each other. She mentioned that she helped me out back in college when I needed a place to crash for a week. I told her that's totally different. Back then, I slept on her couch and didn't make her change a single thing about her routine. I even kept myself busy outside so I wouldn't bother her. But she wouldn't let it go and kept bringing up all the times she's helped me out, even if they were small things from years ago. It was weird, honestly, like she'd been keeping a mental checklist of every favor she's ever done for me. At this point, I knew she wasn't going to back down, so I just said, look, maybe this isn't the right time for you guys to visit. I thought that would be the end of it, but she got quiet and then said, well, if you can't do this for me, I guess we're just not as close as I thought. That hit a nerve. We've always had a pretty solid relationship, but it felt manipulative, like she was trying to guilt me into agreeing to everything just to prove my loyalty to her. I told her I love her, but that doesn't mean I have to throw my comfort out the window. After we hung up, I was feeling kinda bad about it, honestly. It's not like I want to have beef with my sister or make her feel unwelcome, but at the same time, I'm the one who's got to live here every day. I talked to a couple of friends about it, and they were all pretty much on my side, saying that her expectations were too high. One of my friends even suggested that her husband's attachment sounds kind of intense for someone who's been married only a month. Like, not to judge, but you'd think they'd still be in the honeymoon phase and enjoying time together without needing her to bring him everywhere she goes. Then, out of nowhere, my sister texts me again. This time, it's a long message about how they've been struggling with his anxiety for a while, and she's been doing a lot to support him emotionally, so she really needs this time with me as a breather. Apparently, he leans on her a lot, and she's hoping this trip will help him get used to being away from his own comfort zone, and she thought staying with me would be perfect since we're family and I'd understand. But that just made me feel more weird about the whole situation. It started to feel like she wanted me to be part of his therapy plan, which is a lot. Like, I get wanting to support your spouse, but expecting me to fill that role feels really intense. I don't even know him well enough to be that supportive friend or family member for him. She knows that. Anyway, I told her that while I understand her point, I think it would be better if they stayed somewhere nearby instead, like a hotel or an Airbnb, and they could come over during the day to hang out. I figured that way they could still have their own space, and I wouldn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I offered to even help look for places that might be a little more affordable, and I said I'd be totally open to hanging out with them every day if that's what she wanted. I thought that was a fair middle ground. She didn't like that idea at all. She said it would feel like I was pushing them out and treating them like outsiders. She went on about how she thought family would always have an open door policy, and me suggesting a hotel proved I wasn't supportive. I asked her to please try and see my side, but she wouldn't budge. She said if they couldn't stay with me the way they needed to, they'd just cancel the trip altogether because they wouldn't feel welcome anywhere else. Now I'm sitting here thinking, am I seriously in the wrong for wanting to keep my home my own? I don't want them to feel unwelcome, but I also don't want to turn my apartment into someone else's anxiety-safe bubble. If she'd come by herself, this wouldn't even be a problem, but it feels like I'm being asked to make space for a guy who's practically a stranger to me. And not just space, but a whole lifestyle adjustment for a few weeks. It feels really extreme, like I'm being tested for how loyal I am as a sister, and if I say no, I'm a bad sibling. Update 2. So after that last chat, I kinda thought it was done. I assumed my sister and her husband would just decide to come or not without turning my life upside down. But then, my sister sent me this really intense message. She apologized for the back and forth and said she'd been under a lot of stress lately because her husband's anxiety had gotten worse since their wedding. Apparently, he's been struggling a lot more than I realized, and she's been feeling overwhelmed trying to balance her own life with being his support system. She kept saying she was sorry if she'd come off demanding, but she was desperate for a change of scenery to help them both reset. The message was long and honestly kinda sad. I felt bad, but I also didn't know what to say because while I get it, her solution is just a lot. She said if they came, they'd try to make things work without me having to change too much. But the way she worded it made me feel like there'd still be some unspoken expectations. I got this uneasy feeling that even if I agreed, I'd be walking on eggshells the entire time. Like every time I played music or wanted some alone time in my hobby room, I'd be worried if it was too much for them. I still wanted to help in some way, though. So I asked if maybe she could stay with me alone for a bit. Just a short visit to recharge without bringing her husband along. She said she appreciated the offer, but she couldn't leave him behind since he needed her support. So we're back to square one. Then things got unexpected. My mom got involved. Apparently my sister had vented to her about the whole situation, and now my mom's blowing up my phone, telling me I need to be more understanding of their needs. She said it's my duty as family to support my sister and her husband, especially because they're newlyweds and struggling with his mental health. According to my mom, I was being stubborn and selfish for not opening up my home to them. And the kicker? She suggested that if I'm not willing to make adjustments, maybe I should go stay somewhere else for the weeks they'd be here so they could have my apartment to themselves. I couldn't believe it. It's my home, and now I'm the one who's supposed to leave? I told my mom that was completely out of line. I'm the one paying rent, handling everything in my place, and I shouldn't have to leave my own home just so my sister and her husband can play house here. She said, "Sometimes family is about sacrifice." I responded, Sometimes family is also about respect and boundaries. The conversation ended with her saying I was letting them down and that she hoped I'd come to my senses soon. This whole family guilt thing started messing with me. I mean, I get that people with anxiety need a safe space, but I don't think it's fair for my sister to decide that my home has to be that space. I started to doubt myself, though. Like, am I being too rigid? Maybe I should just let them come and suck it up for a few weeks. But then I remembered how hard I've worked to create this calm space for myself, and how much it helps me decompress from work. Giving that up felt like I'd be compromising my own mental health, which no one in my family seemed to care about in all of this. Then, something even stranger happened. A mutual friend of my sister and me reached out. Apparently, my sister had gone on a mini rant in a group chat, making it sound like I'd outright banned them from visiting and didn't care about her husband's issues. The friend was kinda on my side, thankfully, but she did say it's clear my sister's really struggling right now. I started to feel bad all over again, because maybe my sister really did feel like I wasn't there for her. But when I thought about it more, I realized she wasn't really asking for help in a way that considered my life at all. Here's where things took a real twist, though. I texted my sister back and told her that if they truly needed a break, maybe they could still come for a shorter time and we'd set up some ground rules so there'd be no surprises or conflicts. She responded with, "We actually booked an Airbnb nearby. I'm sorry this didn't work out, but we'll try to hang out while we're in town." I was shocked. Turns out, after all that, she and her husband had found their own place to stay. She'd known about it for a couple of days, but hadn't told me because she was seeing if I'd reconsider. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved, but another part of me was frustrated that she'd put me through so much guilt and drama when they had an alternative all along. I told her I wished she'd been upfront about the Airbnb sooner, but she said she wanted to give me a chance to help them first. That was her logic. She felt I needed an opportunity to step up as a sister. She said she was testing whether I'd make sacrifices for her marriage. She even hinted that my refusal to make these changes proved I wasn't family-oriented. It felt like a punch to the gut. I asked if we could still get together for a casual visit while they were in town, just to keep the peace, and she agreed, but with a lukewarm attitude. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this. It's bizarre to think she put me through this whole moral dilemma as some kind of loyalty test. In the end, I'm glad I didn't cave because it feels like if I had, this would have only been the beginning of more unrealistic expectations from her. So yeah, now my sister's in town, they're staying somewhere else, and we've barely talked since. It's clear she's still upset, and honestly, I'm feeling a weird mix of guilt and relief. I've been replaying the whole thing in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently. But every time I try to picture it, I just end up back at the same conclusion. I didn't ask for this drama, and I don't think it's fair that my family expected me to sacrifice my comfort and boundaries for her marriage. I've decided that if she wants to talk it out, I'm open to it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to chase her down and apologize for protecting my space. Maybe one day she'll see where I was coming from, or maybe not. Either way, I think I made the right call. If someone's love or loyalty relies on you bending over backward for them, then maybe it's time to reevaluate that relationship. Family or not, everyone deserves boundaries.